Okay, you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from Rabbi Liff, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time just to say that I've known Rabbi Liff for many, many years. But when I read his book, which talking about, and I strongly recommend, when I read Rabbi Liff's book, I realized that I did not know Rabbi Liff because his connection with so many of the Gedolim that we all grew up with and knew from afar, and the connection that he had with so many of them, and the close connection, was to me simply amazing. And all of the things that he writes were things that we saw from afar, and I'm just waiting with bated breath to hear verbally some of the things that he's going to add. So that really attests to Rabbi Liff's humility. Anova, because if I could know him for so many years and not realize how great his chinuch is, that's because of his humility. And we're very pleased that Rabbi Liff is with us and looking forward to hearing from him. Thank you, Yashikoach, Rabbi Kalinsky, Rabbi Schoonmaker, Rabbi all the Rabbeim here that I know. And first of all, it's a pleasure to be invited to Darchei Noyam, David Chappelle's. I'm not sure exactly what the official name is. I think I hit the numbers. As Rabbi Kalinsky mentioned, we know each other for many, many years. Not only do we know each other, but our wives know each other very, very well. In fact, they're even chavrusas in a very, very interesting way. They both paint together. Even during the Corona, they somehow re-picked up their chavrusashaft. So I was brought in today to really speak about a book that I merited to have written, published by ArtScrum. A little self-promotion. This is the book, At His Rebbi's Side. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it where any good bookstores. It's very hard to get it here in Israel because they did sell, thank God, Baruch Hashem, a slew of copies. And there's a story behind a story behind a story. So I was contemplating that really, what's the purpose of my standing in front of you and telling you my personal stories that I had b'schus, great merit to have with Gedolim? How's that going to impact you? How's that going to somehow transform your lives? And I was just thinking about in the context of the world that we live in today, perhaps tying it in a little bit with the days that we're having right now, which is Zion, which is Ches and Tes and Asar B'Tevis. Today is the yahrzeit of Ezra HaSofer. Tomorrow is the fast day of the 10th of Teves, which has within it all the elements of the destruction of all of the Beit HaMikdash. And that's why it's so chamor, not getting into all the different ramifications of that. And to recognize this is the world that we live in is a destruction world. We're living in a world of destruction, and it's very, very simple to see it today and to see how fragmented we are and how much we're in need of a Beis HaMikdash. We're in need of somehow an uplifting experience. And I merited, without any of my own schusim, but the schus of my parents, my illustrious grandparents, and everybody else that put me into the world, to be brought up as an FFB and in a community and a time where I was able to discover at a very young age, not even realizing that I lived amongst great people. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and my father was a Talmud Muvuk of the Rosh Yeshiva Rav Ruderman Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who was a Talmud Muvuk, and I'm sure you might have heard these names. If you haven't heard the names, I'll listen to you. The Alter of Slobodka, the original Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and Rav Ruderman embodied within him Slobodka. I tell people that even though I grew up in Baltimore, or Baltimore, for those of you that might have a Southern Baltimore accent, I really didn't grow up in Baltimore. I grew up in Slobodka in America. At a young age, because of my father's involvement with his Rebbi and being a Rebbi in the yeshiva, I was what's called a yeshiva brat. You know what I mean? Like you have army brats, they go up on the army base. I grew up in yeshiva not even realizing that I was inculcating a lot of deep messages from these great people. One of them was Rav Ruderman's. My father played a big role because he was a direct conduit from Rav Ruderman to me. And the Mashgiach in Yisrael, his name was David Krombles, who learned in the Mir in Europe. And then subsequently, he went with the Mir Yeshiva in the famous event during World War II, where they transferred to Shanghai. And then eventually, he came over to America and became the Mashgiach of the Yeshiva. And these influences played a big role in my upbringing. I used to walk with Reb David. I would go to the Rosh Yeshiva's house as a young boy. One of the cute stories which I bring in the book, again, it's a child's outlook, but later on, it somehow impacted me in a certain way, which I used in my own educational experiences. So I was, as a kid, a lot of the stories that I have in the book, some of them are humorous, some of them are like involved with ball playing, because I loved to play ball when I was young. I love to play ball now, but I'm just a lot older. So when I was a young kid, we used to play ball. There was a game in America, which you might not be familiar with. It's more like a New York game, but if you live in an area where they have steps, it's called step ball. Step ball is like some sort of processed baseball game where you take a small Pensy Pinky or a Spalding ball and you try to hit the corner of the step, and you have a single, a double, and a triple, and a home run. For those of you who are from America, you know what it is. If not, you have to have it translated by your South African or your English friends, right? So the greatest step ball court was in front of Rav Ruderman's house. He had great steps. So myself and Rav Ruderman's nephew, my good friend Rav Yankee Neuberger, is a very, very fine lawyer and wonderful balabas in Baltimore, Maryland. One day, as young kids, hot summer day, picture the scene, hot summer day, Baltimore, Maryland, very humid, very, very muggy. Two kids, you know, we're 7, 8, 9 years old at best, and we're playing a game of stoop ball or step ball in front of Rav Ruderman's house, and we're having a great time, single, double, triple. And sometimes if you hit it on the corner, you get a single or double or home run. If you don't hit it in the corner, sometimes it bounces back. And where does it bounce back? It bounces back against the front door of Rabbi Ruderman's house, which was a metal screen door. And we didn't realize it at the time, but every single time the ball would go back, it would go wonk, right? And it would give a nice little bang against the door. And we were making a racket. We didn't realize that the Rosh Yeshiva was preparing his sheer quality, which he was going to give that day. And guess what? We were really disturbing him. So after a few wonks, even Rav Ruderman, who was entirely engrossed in his learning, it was disturbing him. He comes to the front door and he opens the front door. Now we knew one thing. The Rosh Yeshiva was a great person. And it finally dawned upon us, hey, we probably were disturbing him. So we were waiting for the typical event would be is, can you please skedaddle out of here, or could you do it, in a way that not bother me so I can concentrate on learning? And Rav Ruderman took in the scene. He saw two young kids playing ball, and this was Rav Ruderman's reaction. This is a picture of what a great gadol learned and implemented in education. And he said to us, he didn't come along and complain. He said, in Yiddish, I'll say it in Yiddish and then I'll explain it in English. He says, "Was bleibst du? What do you like?" It was a hot summer day. So two little kids were playing ball on a hot summer day in Baltimore. What did they say? We both answered in unison, "Ice cream. We like ice cream." So Rav Ruderman goes, he puts his hands in his pocket. He took out a veritable fortune, $5 in those days, 5 bills. And he says, "Go buy ice cream. Asach ice cream. Go buy ice cream, a lot of ice cream." And we were so happy. We were so joyous. So what do? We picked ourselves up. We went to the local store. We bought ourselves each, in my recollection, it was like each of us got in those days for $5. You got like a half a pint of ice cream. And we sat on the front stoop of Rav Ruderman's house on a hot summer day, and we enjoyed delicious cold geschmacka ice cream. What was the lesson that we learned from this? The lesson that we learned from this is that Rav Ruderman recognized kids are kids, children are children. Now's not the time to give them musar. What are you disturbing a person that's sitting and learning? If I can have the same effect by imparting to them a chinuch lesson, that they're important, and that my time is also important, and do it b'vasachas, so why not get the best out of both worlds? That is, to a certain extent, a genius, and that also shows us what the Torah is supposed to inculcate into a person. How we're supposed to give the right time and the right place to know when to give musar, how to give musar, how to be able to extract that a young child should walk away with a great feeling that even, and at the end of the day, we knew that we were disturbing him. We knew that we had stopped him from something important, but he was able to gain our attention, and literally not only our attention, a lesson for life through a simple story. I'm going to use a lot of sports stories because I liked sports when I was young. So we spoke about the Mashgiach of Baltimore, Rabbi Kronglis, who was a great, great tzaddik and a from the Balei Musar, from the Talmidim of Rabbi Yerucham. And he was great. When I first came to the Mir, and I told Reb Nachum, Zatzal, who was the son-in-law of Reb Chaim Shulevitz, without getting into all the different names, Reb Kalinsky, which I will tell you who they are afterwards. So Reb Ruderman, Reb David was a bacher in Mir, and the Mashgiach appointed him to daven for the Amid on Yom Noraim, which was an unheard thing. And Reb Nachum told me that he appointed him because Reb David, even when he was a bacher, he was considered of age, he was considered mature, he was considered that prominence that he should be appointed to be the Baal Tefillah on Yom Noraim. So Reb David, we remember him very, very well. He has a son, Reb Ezra Kronglis, who's a personal friend of mine, and the two of us were sent away, not sent away, but we went away to yeshiva in New York in a place called Staten Island. Any of you know what New York is? Staten Island. At that time, a new yeshiva had opened up, founded by Rav Moshe Feinstein, who I had discussed and I write about. We'll mention him a little bit in a moment. The great gadol in America, and his son Yibadol Chaim Tov Baruch, Reb Ruvain, was the Rosh Yeshiva. And I went together with Reb Ezra. We went to the yeshiva. My first experience of going away, being away from home. I'm in a yeshiva, and I like to play ball. I love to play ball. Guess what? Can you imagine you get to a yeshiva, you're a 13-year-old kid, and you come to yeshiva, and you're expected to learn a certain amount of hours in the morning, so you're expected to go to English classes in the afternoon. But they also give you time for recess. Recess is great. That's what time to play ball is. And guess what? They even put up a makeshift backboard to play basketball. Wonderful. They had told me beforehand that there's going to be a basketball court. They told me there's going to be a basketball. They just forgot one ingredient, a basketball. Now, can you imagine what it is to have a basketball backboard and no basketball? It's like the Iker and the Tuffle. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do? So I'm sitting there for the first 2 weeks, and literally I'm going crazy. I cannot sit and learn every single day and go to school and not be expected to play ball. So I sent a message to my mother, Shabika Stark. I got to get a basketball. Over here, they're not giving out basketballs. I don't know where to get a basketball. She says, you know what? Reb David, the Mashgiach, is coming up in a week, and I'm going to put it in a suitcase and we'll send other things up with for you. And she put my basketball inside together with cookies and other things which I needed. And I was just waiting with a bated breath. Can't wait. Wow, the basketball's going to come. I was telling all my friends, the basketball's coming. It's coming. It's happening. It's about to happen. And finally, Reb David, the Mashgiach, arrives. He doesn't know what's inside the suitcase. He just knows that there was a suitcase sent. His son was there. He was also the Rebbi of two of the prominent Rabbi in the yeshiva. And the fact that he was a gadol was coming to the yeshiva for the first time was a big covet. So everyone went out to greet him. I also went out to greet him. And when I went out there, Rabbi said to me, Yeshua, gain them a duffel bag. Go take your duffel bag, which I was waiting for. I quickly ran and got the duffel bag. I ran upstairs. The first thing I pulled out that leather basketball and I was just like holding it. Geschmack, wonderful. Then I had cookies. I even was about me this. I shared it with my friends. And then immediately, what did I say? Guys, let's go play. Let's go play. So we run down the front steps. This was an old house. We didn't realize that there's still things going on. Like there's a whole entourage of people who were escorting the Malava, Rabbi, into the building. The Rabbi were all there. And as we're going in, again, screen doors are a big thing with all these stories. All of a sudden, I go out first with the ball. I'm outside with the ball. And my friends already took in the scene. Hey, who's coming up the front steps? The Mashgiach, Rabbi, and all the Rabbeim. So what do? How do you greet a gadol with a basketball? So I decided in my childish mind, what you do is you take the basketball and you put it behind your back. And you like chuckle, like maybe they won't notice it or something like that, which I did. I didn't do it on purpose. Just put it behind my back. I just felt it was respectful. And then the most embarrassing moment in my life took place. What was that? This was a large wooden porch. The ball fell out of my hands. And this was the sound that the ball made. The ball went like this. Boink, 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 boink. I'll repeat it again. Boink, 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 boink. It was the loudest boink, boink, boink that I ever heard in my life. And everyone that was there, all the Rebbeim, everyone that was there started laughing. Because my plan of hiding the ball fell apart. The ball is now boinking, boinking, boinking on the porch. And little Yehoshua Liff is feeling what's called busha. There was one person that didn't laugh. The Mashgiach Reb David. Reb David did not laugh. And Reb David immediately assessed the situation and he turns to me. He says, Yehoshua, gay nem the ball and gay shvil. Yehoshua, quickly, go get the ball and go play ball. And at that moment, Reb David alleviated those feelings of embarrassment. And again, he was able to give over. You're a young kid. You got to play ball. Don't feel embarrassed about it. These are the great things that I was able to see in Gedolim. When we speak about Gedolim, a lot of times we speak about their great scholarship, which they definitely were most in nefesh for. It doesn't come easily to become a gadol in Torah. They toiled and they toiled and they toiled. They toiled not only in Torah, but they also toiled in avoda, and especially the avoda of midas. But where it came out was in the small things, in the small practical things. I want to do a little show and tell over here, because since we're speaking about the Gedolim, which I write about, and the majority of them are not with us anymore, I want to show you a picture which hangs in our house. I got permission from my wife to show it. This is a picture of the Gadol Ador that we have today in Eretz Yisrael, which many of you are familiar with, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Shlita should be Gezut and Stark. Behind him is his Rebbitzin Batsheva Kanievsky. This picture was taken approximately 2 weeks before the Rebbitzin passed away. This was the last picture taken of them together. Now, the first thing is just to notice the picture. Look at the way they are appearing, smiling, happy. They had a wonderful relationship. One of the things that's worthwhile to know about Gedolim and their families is that they're normal people. When we say normal people, they're really normal. They have normal, healthy relationships. They have camaraderie and love and affection. It might not be the modern day looking on a television and on a movie screen, which is not really what love and affection is all about. It's the real deal. And this picture, I'm going to tell you the story behind the picture. It's not written in my book. This is maybe book number 2. We can write about it. I have a Talmud of mine who I call him a Gedolim groupie. He's a Gedolim groupie. When he came to Ner Yaakov, which I was the Rosh Hashiva of, he had hair down to here. He came from Queens. He really came from a modern Orthodox background. And eventually, by being in a yeshiva environment such as ours, he was able to set his sights a little bit higher. And at one point, I recommended that he go and daven by Reb Yashiv, who was one of the Gedolim I read about, the father-in-law of Reb Kanievsky. And he used to go in the morning to daven by him. It's a whole story on its own. Eventually, for 10 years, he became very, very close to Reb Yashiv. And he even wrote a book, which Feldheim published, about his episodes. I wrote the introduction to the book. So I have a Talmud who's an even greater groupie than I am. Today, he is able, and even now during Corona, if I need to get any message into Reb Chaim's house, he's the conduit for me to get it in. Now, this Talmud, my name is Binyamin Kirshner. Binyamin has he took off a page of a little bit of my book. Some of the stories that I have inside my book is that I had a car, and because I had a car, I was able to drive here in Eretz Yisrael, great to go. I had a chazaka to drive Reb Yashiv every Erev Rosh Hashanah to the Kotel for over 20 years. And that was something which allowed me to have a personal relationship together with Reb Yashiv. Binyamin, now he takes Reb Asher Arieli, drives him home. The great Mashgiach, Reb Chaim Walken, the Mashgiach of Ateres, he's very, very close with. So this story took place. Reb Chaim Walken calls up this Talmud and he says, Binyamin, I'd like to go to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Would you mind driving me? So he said, for sure. Now, this is one of the first times that he had been by Reb Chaim. This was when Reb Yashiv was still alive. So he said to himself, okay, I'm going to go to take Reb Chaim. You hear a lot of Chaims over here. Reb Chaim Walken to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. What am I going to do during that time? I'm not going to be inside when they're talking. So he is a very entrepreneurish kind of person. He has a kosher camera and a video screen. And he said, you know what? I'll take pictures in the morning of Reb Yashiv, who was alive then. It was during his last year of his life. I'll take, I don't know if it was the last year of his life, but during the last year of his life, I'll take pictures of him saying Tehillim after davening, and I'll show it to Rebbi Kanievsky. I can do a chesed. So that's what he did. He took a video of Reb Yashiv after davening saying Tehillim. And he shows up at the Kanievskys. Reb Chaim Walken goes into Reb Chaim, they have a private meeting, and he goes over to Rebbi and said, I want to tell you, I have a video of your father saying Tehillim yesterday. So she was so excited. So she starts looking at the video. We have to show it. We have to show it to Reb Chaim. So he says, I'm not going to show it to Reb Chaim. She said, no, just come. They go inside. As Reb Chaim Kanievsky is speaking to Reb Chaim Walken, Reb Kanievsky, I guess, had permission to go in whenever she wanted. And she says to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, says, look, the Tata, my father, your Shver, is saying Tehillim. So Reb Chaim stops, and he starts looking at the video of Reb Yashiv saying Tehillim. And he's smiling. This picture was the picture taken right afterwards. Rebbi Kanievsky and Reb Chaim with a big smile on their face. That's not the end of the story. You have to hear the end of the story. The end of the story goes like this. Reb Chaim is looking at the pictures of Reb Yashiv. He's stopping everything. Why is he looking at those pictures? Isn't it bittul Torah to look at pictures? Not at all. The pasuk says, you're supposed to see your Rebbe. Reb Chaim held Reb Yashiv is Rebbe. When I can see a Rebbe doing something good, you go ahead, you go see him doing something good. That's the halacha aspect of it. It could be other reasons. Kibbut Avayim, to make his Rebbe feel good. It could be a million reasons. But listen to this. While this is happening, Binyamin, my Talmud, is taking pictures of Reb Chaim and the Rebbe looking at the video of Reb Yashiv. He took a video of them. The next morning, after davening in Reb Yashiv's caravan, Binyamin goes over to the grandson of Reb Yashiv and he says, Binyamin, I have pictures of Reb Chaim looking at the Rav saying Tehillim. So he says, we have to show it to Reb Yashiv. They go over to Reb Yashiv, and listen to this, Reb Yashiv's every moment was so precious. Go over, and Reb Yashiv stops, and I can't tell you 2 minutes, 3 minutes, he's looking at the pictures of, and the video of Reb Chaim and the Rebbe and his daughter. And Binyamin is the Talmud, and then there's Binyamin is the Amical of Reb Yashiv. Says to him, he says, look, he wanted to make it. Reb Yashiv was very, very weak then. So he said to him, look, Reb Chaim is Bathsheba is smiling. Look, Bathsheba, his daughter, is smiling. Yashin says quickly, Chaim Shmeichel Deichit. Chaim is also smiling. Speaking about his son, his distinguished son-in-law. Chaim is also smiling. This is not the end of the story. The end of the story is, unfortunately, that the Rebbi passed away, as I said, 2 weeks later. And it was a big loss, not only for Klal Yisrael, but for Reb Chaim himself. And Binyamin went to Reb Chaim to be Menachem Ovel, and he showed the grandson of Reb Chaim that he has pictures and a video of the last moments when he was together, the last pictures taken. It seems they sent everybody out of the Shiva house at that point, and they wanted to be Mechazik Reb Chaim, and they showed Reb Chaim the last pictures of himself together with the Rebbe. Why am I saying over this story? The Gedolim, not only are they normal, but they show us how we should have our personal relationships. They're always constantly guides to us. That's what makes them Gedolim. And this is a lesson which I think, especially during these times, we should keep in mind. How, with everything that's going on in the world, when we have the role models in front of us that we can model ourselves after, and we see how pleasant they are, how darchei noyam they are, then for sure, this is the way we want to live our lives. I want to say over 2 stories, and then I'll give anyone that wants to ask any questions, if you have any personal things you want to speak about, we can talk about it. Just 2 stories, and it shows greatness of character and greatness of spirit. One of the people that I was over to have a relationship with was Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Shlomo Zalman was just you saw him, his smile, his interpersonal relationships. They say over that he was when his Rebbe passed away. He said over at the Levaya, I was at the Levaya, he said he has nothing to ask Mechila from because their relationship was just perfect, which is like, he wasn't saying it as Gaiva. That was the reality was they just had a great relationship because great people, they really know how to be role models. I ran a yeshiva for many, many years. And at one point, and Rabbi Kalitsky could probably relate to this, we were in a location and then we had to move. We moved to an area in Yerushalayim called Kataman. Kataman at the time was a pretty irreligious neighborhood. And you weren't there when we were at Kataman, right? So we rented a building, which at one point was the Hartman Institute. It was the Mexican embassy. It was a school for filmmaking, and it was used as institutions over the years. Now, if you know a little bit about law, you know that there's all kinds of zoning laws. At the time, our lawyer felt that it was not a problem because it's been used for so many years, and we renovated the building. 2 weeks before we were about to move in, I was coming back from the States. My administrator meets me at the airport and says, we have a problem. The neighbors were secular. The neighbors are taking us to a court case, and we have to go straight to the lawyers. We go to our lawyer, and our lawyer really gave us a 5% chance of winning the case. We found out that we're going up not only against the neighbors, we're really going against the city of Jerusalem. There's some very, very important people living in that neighborhood. They looked at the word yeshiva, and they said, oh, this is going to blacken the neighborhood, so to speak, right? And they didn't realize that the yeshiva that we were running was really for wild and woolly guys who were coming from modern backgrounds who really would like to go party more than spending time in the base fetish. And our job was to try to inculcate them and to bring them around. But they saw the word yeshiva, that was like a no-no for them. So we had a court case on Yud Elul. And because it was a tzara, and we had invested a lot of money, and there was a real question of what we're going to do. We had boys coming in a couple of days. So what are you doing? When you have a tzara, you go to a gadol. So I went to daven Friday morning with Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in Rechavia, and after davening, I went over to him and I explained to him the situation, and he said these words: "Oi, medaf davnen. Oi, medaf davnen. Oi, we have to daven. We have to daven." He didn't say everything's going to be all right. He didn't give me a bracha. It's all going to go away. He just said we have to daven. We have to daven. That's what Reb Shlomo said. He commiserated with me, but he didn't necessarily give me the Holy Grail and that everything's going to be fine. So we went to court, It happened to be that the judge that was supposed to show up, who was a secular judge, did not show up. A new judge came in who was a very prestigious judge, Judge Ben Zimra, who is a religious judge, but he was a stickler for the law. And the zoning laws, it was not zoned as a school, even though it was used for many, many years as schools and institutions. But listen to what happened. We go to court, and we get into the court, and the judge is getting into the details, and the lawyer from the city is giving over why you're not allowed to be in this building. And the judge says, "Ani lo mevin, ani shachen." I'm a neighbor. I know that building. And for over 20 years, I've seen that they've been using it for institutions. And you didn't do anything about them. Why are you bothering with these people? Oh, Biglash is a yeshiva. Biglash is a yeshiva. It seems to be some sort of issue that you have anti-religious tones. Now, he didn't say you can change the law, but this is what he said. And then he asked me some questions about the yeshiva. And eventually, after being in there for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, he sent us out. And he's going to make a court decision. When I went out, I did what Reb Shlomo Zalman said. I started davening because Reb Shlomo Zalman said to daven. I davened. For over 2 hours, I davened. I said till him not once, not twice, but 3 times. And then we were called in. And when we were called in, we were given the decision, which was a written decision, which ended up being in favor of us being able to remain in the building. And he based it upon his interpretation of law, which is always the way it is. And he said, what was the problem? It's zoned for housing. He says, Mazeh Bayit Yehudi. What is a Jewish home? We say it in davening. Kihi Beit Chayenu, V'orech Yameinu, Uvahem Negeh Yomam B'Layla. A Jewish house is a house where people toil and they study Torah. And that's the definition of a house. Therefore, if you're in Israel and you have a house, you can have learning going on. You have chabrusas. Sometimes you have shiurim. Sometimes, he said, afilu lefamim osim minyan. We can even make a minyan once in a while. I started asking him, I said, what, ma'im shir klali? How about shir klali? He said, you have a shaker, be quiet. So what happens is that we won this unprecedented decision, which eventually was used in the Supreme Court. And I have to tell you, every year when it comes the day, Yud Elul, I make a Suda as a remembrance of the great gift that Hashem gave us. Because of that, Yeshiva was able to continue and had many, many more productive years. And we did a lot of wonderful things. And that's not the end of the story. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday in Yud Elul, I called Reb Shlomo Zalman's house and I said to the grandson, I said, we just got the court decision that we won the case. So the grandson says to me, Hasaba mechake kol hayom, hu mitpalel kol hayom. The Saba has been waiting the whole time. Since he told you to daven, hu mitpalel kol hayom, he's davening the whole time. When Reb Shlomo Zalman said to me, Oy, medaf daven, and oy, medaf daven, and we have to daven, he didn't mean to say that you have to daven on your own. He's going to daven with us. There's no question in my mind that his davening was worth a lot more than my davening. And I said this over in the Shiva, after Reb Shlomo Zalman, I said it over to the sons of Reb Shlomo Zalman, and they said, these are the stories, and there are other related stories we don't have enough time for. Great people do things in a way which you can't even imagine, because their greatnesses, as Rav Kalinsky said, it's not really about me, it's really about the great Gedolim who I saw, their humility, their love for the Jewish people, their empathy for the Jewish people, their responsibility for the Jewish people. And this is a characteristic that we find by these great Gedolim. I don't know how much more time we have. One more story. Okay, so one more story. This story I said over last week. Last Friday night, I went to visit my brother-in-law together with my wife. I have a brother-in-law who was the Rav in La Jolla, California, for over 33 some odd years, and Rabbi Jeff Walderanter. And anyone here from there? So Rabbi Jeff is my brother-in-law, and we went to spend Shabbos with them in Modi'in, and we didn't realize at the time that they had also invited a couple from their community in La Jolla that happens to be here in Israel with their daughter. And And this daughter just graduated Berkeley. She graduated Berkeley. Anyone here went to Berkeley? Okay. So their daughter came to Israel now because the brothers went into the army, left in the army. Somehow they were able to get in. And we started speaking a little bit about campus life. And she's planning on, she's going into the medical program. She was very involved with APAC. She was involved with all the Jewish unions. She was involved with Hillel. She was involved with Chabad. Everything else was going on campus. And again, Hashgacha Pratis happens to be, she said she had a religious roommate, a roommate who became religious and eventually is living here in Israel. It ends up that young lady goes to Chappelle's Girls Division. She got married now, and she is the Shabbos beforehand, her and her husband, who's studying in not a competition, but Machon Shlomo, came to us for a meal. So her roommate comes to us for a meal. Just showed the Hashgacha Pratis. That just was like fascinating. So we started discussing. I wanted to get her a little bit involved. I said, how was Jewish life? And I didn't get into her personal, religiosity, but I just wanted to hear, what's it like? And she said, she's kosher and everything else. And then we started speaking about medical ethics. And I said, you know what? When you get into medical ethics, you see the world today, corona, vaccinations, everything else. The Gedolim have their way of analyzing things and putting things in the proper perspective. Sometimes we don't know really what's going on, but you have to have the Amunah, B'tachon, the Gedol. They really have a tremendous, phenomenal aspect of understanding based upon the precepts of the Torah. Now listen to the story, which I write in the book. There was a man, a very, very chashuv Talmid Chacham here in Yerushalayim. And he had, unfortunately, he had contracted a very illness of cancer. And the doctors here in Israel gave up hope. And they told him that there's really nothing that we can do. It's terminal. And you have a very short time period. There's some experimental drug procedure that there's one place in the United States to have. It doesn't have a very high chance of success rate, but that's the only opportunity we can have, and that's the only thing we can recommend. And you have to take care of it right away. This took place on a Friday. Friday afternoon, after the meeting, this person goes to Rav Elyashiv's house. Rav Elyashiv listens and analyzes, because everything is based upon a lot of scientific understandings. Well, what is the statistics of your success of staying alive without treatment? Very little, 5%. What are the statistics of your staying alive if you'll take this experimental? 15 to 20%. Not that much of a degree. And the doctors say, if I don't leave right away, then every day and every hour is important, which means he has to travel on Shabbos. So Rav Elyashiv, based upon the data that he had and the analysis, he said, I don't see a heter because the opportunity of really getting healthy doesn't really seem to be it. In order to be Machal Shabbos, he doesn't see a heter to be Machal Shabbos. You can go after Shabbos, you can't go during Shabbos. Okay? Person Talmid Chacham, Rav Elyashiv, he said, what should I do? Davening. That's it. We have to daven. That's what he does. So this person goes home, and his wife asked, what happened? Rav Elyashiv said, I should go after Shabbos. She said, that can't be. It can't be. She runs to Rav Elyashiv's house, and somehow she gets in, and she goes to Rav Elyashiv, and she starts crying and pleading and begging, and she says, the Rav has to send him. I know this will be the refuah. Yeah, you have to send it. So Rav Elyashiv stops. Now, Rav Elyashiv, if you knew anything about Rav Elyashiv, Rav Elyashiv was encyclopedic, and his analysis was based upon every single facet of Torah. He stopped for 5 minutes, which is 1,000 years in our life. And he thought, and after 5 minutes he said, he can go on Shabbos. And they start calling Rabbi Führer and everything else, and they get a medical plane to take him and to fly him out. And they fly him out on Shabbos. Eventually gets to the States. He goes through this experimental drug, and 6 months later he's healed, and the story has a happy ending. Person comes back to Yerushalayim, the first place that he goes to Rav Elyashiv's house. And he thanks him so much for the heter, and he tells him what happened and everything else. And then he says to Rav Elyashiv, Rebbi, Yilamdenu Rabbeinu. I don't understand. When I asked you the question, you said halachically it's not permitted. And when my wife came and she started crying, all of a sudden you changed your mind. What is it? The wife's tears changed the Shulchan Aruch? Rabbi Yehoshua said, Chas v'shalom. You have to take into respect a person's tears, no question about it, but it can't change the halacha. I took a look and I said, you know what? And again, it's a big chiddush, but he said there's an interesting halacha. If doctors say that there is no refuah, but the person himself says, I know that this medicine will work for me. I feel this medicine. It's called kimli. It's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. If a person says kimli, then he trumps the doctors. When you came along, you asked the shayla. You just asked the shayla. You asked the facts. You didn't say kimli. But your wife came along and she said kimli. Now, usually, kimli applies to the person. Over here, I had to say, well, what is the halacha of a wife? Where we know that there's a lumdus called ishto kagufo. Does ishto kagufo apply in such a situation or not? Rabbi Yehoshua had to go 5 minutes, Rabbi Yehoshua, to work out the sugya, to get to the psak halacha, that ishto kagufo applies over here and kimli works. This is where you see the scholarship of Gedolim is beyond our scope, beyond our imagination. I hope I gave you a little bit of a window into the world of Gedolim that I was able to get to know. I would like just to say that we'll end off with a short vort, try and make it as short as possible. I said over this last week, and someone added on to it, the Sfas Emes says an interesting thing. The Sfas Emes, a Yid came to the Sfas Emes in the days of the Sfas Emes, when there was an epidemic that was going on, a cholera epidemic, and people were dying by the hundreds. It was the 6th day of Hanukkah, and he came to the Rebbe, and he said, Rebbe, the whole town, people are dying left and right. What should we do? So the Sfas Emes said, what's a plague? A plague is a dever. He says, Medaf Zushtellen the Vav, the 6th day of Hanukkah, the Vav, to the dever, to the plague. You take the kayach of the Chanukah lichta, the 6th night, which is a vav, and you attach it to the dever, and what does it turn out to? To devarai. It's not dever, it's devarai. And the pasuk says until him, Yishlach devarai v'yirape. There's a pasuk until him, Perikov Zayin. Yishlach devarai v'yirape. The dever will turn into devarai, and you'll be merape, there'll be a refuah. And they say that from that time and onwards, the cholera stopped in that particular community. I don't know if it was throughout the entire place. So a big Talmud Chacham I said this over to, and he added on the concept. The concept is like this: a dever, a plague, is really a dibur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is speaking to us, but we don't attach it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It just remains dever. But when we take the vav, which is always mechibur, and we're mechaber it, we attach it. Now, hey, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, devarai, it's Yishlach devarai. It's his words. The dever is coming from him. Once you attach it, the wrapping, there's a refuah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is speaking to us. I don't know what's going to be in the future over here. The next time I ever come, Seger, Lo Seger. But it was a pleasure to be with you today. I want to give everybody a bracha, Mitzvah Hashem. We should be zocher to grow in Torah, Yerushalayim, Midas Tovas, learn the lessons that we learned. Hashem is bracha. We should be zocher to Mashiach Tzidkeinu, Amen. Thank you for having me.